Section 5.1 Interactive Assignment Objective 1. Your daily commute to work requires that you cross railroad tracks. At this particular railroad crossing, the trains tend to be long and slow, so getting stopped by a train will likely make you late for work. You start recording data to determine the likelihood of arriving at the tracks while a train is there. The data contain the day number and whether a train was present or not for 200 consecutive days in which you drove to work. In the data set, the column train shows a series of zeros and ones. In that column, a 0 indicates there was no train present, and a 1 indicates that a train was present. The column aggregate train represents the cumulative number of times a train was present. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this data in the data table. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up into StatCrunch so we can see the data a little bit more clearly. Okay, so now that I have this data open up into StatCrunch, again, we can see that this represents 200 days. So we have the day that goes all the way down to 200. And then, again, the train as to when it is there tells you whether it is 0 or a 1. And then the aggregate train is the column that represents the cumulative number of times a train has been spotted. And then therefore here we have the proportion, okay, which is the probability of that particular value. So in part A it says consider the first 10 days of data. For this time period, what proportion of days had a train present? So coming back up here, we're going to go all the way to the 10th day. So let's take a look at the 10th day. So when we go to the 10th day, then we're going to see that we have a probability that's going to be in the last column, and that proportion is 0.2. So therefore, to 4 decimal places, it's going to be 0.20000. Okay. The next question says, consider the first 20 days of data. For this time period, what proportion of days had a train present? So let's go to the first 20 days. So there's 20 days. And if you look over to your right, here's the proportion. And the proportion is 0.25. And we're going to round it to 4 decimal places. So it's going to be 0.2500. Okay, next. It says, were you stopped by a train on the 30th day? So let's take a look here. Here's the 30th day. And was there a train present there? Okay, we see that that represents a 0. And a 0 means that there was no train available. Okay, now consider all 200 days of data. For this time period, what proportion of days had a train present? So we're going to go all the way down to 200, and then we're going to go all the way to the right over here, and the proportion is 0.2. So in our question, we're going to round it to 4 decimal places. We're going to see that it's 0.2000. Okay, now in the last question it says graph the cumulative proportion of days a train was present against the number of days, meaning the number of days should be in the horizontal axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here, we're going to graph. Okay, so we're going to graph where the day is the horizontal axis and the proportion, because it's saying the cumulative proportion, is going to be on the y-axis. So we're going to go to graph, and then we're going to create a scatter plot. We're going to make sure the x variable is the day. We know that the y variable is going to be the aggregate proportion train. We want to make sure that points and lines are selected so that we can see a line. And then if we want, we can create vertical and horizontal lines so we can see the data a little bit better. And then we're going to select compute. So therefore, there is our graph. Now, we need to compare that to the graph that we see that's given here in this example. So if we take a look at the first graph, okay, we can see that this goes all the way up above 0.30, so it's not going to be the first one. If we look at the second one, this doesn't match our graph at all. Okay, now if we take a look at C, again, this doesn't match our graph at all. And then if we go to D, we can see that it's going to match our graph. So therefore, this matches our graph, so D is the correct choice. Okay, now the next question is, what is the estimate of the probability of being struck by a train during your commute? Now the estimate is located on the graph. That is estimating it. And it's saying, what is the estimate of the probability of being struck by a train during your commute? Which means that here at the 200th mark, okay, we're going to highlight that point. So at row 200, what is the proportion, which is 0.2? When we highlight it on our graph, on StatCrunch, we see that the answer is 0.2. That represents the estimate. So therefore, 0.2000 is the estimated probability. And again, from the graph.